Chapter 15. Carb counting. Carb counting is essential, especially if you use the basal bolus insulin regimen. Although carb counting does take up a lot of time and effort, once you've got the hang of it, it can lead to better blood sugar control and more flexibility. It doesn't mean total freedom to eat what you want, but does mean that special occasions and treats can be more easily looked after, so you can adjust your insulin to match. How to count carbs. Carbohydrates can be measured in two ways, in grams or as carbohydrate portions, CP. 1 CP is usually equivalent to 10 grams of carbohydrates. So find the method that you can understand that works better for you. Once you've got to grips with estimating the amount of carbohydrates you are going to eat and drink, you'll need to know the insulin to carbohydrate ratio. Insulin to carbohydrate ratios are different from person to person, so you will have your own personal ratio depending on your age, weight, activity levels, and how sensitive you are to insulin. Your doctor will help you work this out, and eventually you might even have a different insulin to carb ratio for each meal. They will usually estimate your starting insulin to carb ratio and then fine-tune this based on your blood sugar control. Refer to Chapter 9. If you know how many grams of carbohydrates are in a meal and your insulin to carb ratio, then you can work out the number of units of bolus insulin you need to take for that meal. The amount you actually take will also depend on other factors such as your blood sugar level, illness, or planned activity. The first step to carb counting is knowing which food and drinks contain carbohydrates. This is done by research into food groups and their carbohydrates. Applications like Fat Secret shows you the carbohydrates for different foods and portions. Stop, think, and make a mental note of which food and drink will need to be counted. Get label savvy. Scrutinize the nutrition labels. Know what to look for and work out the amount of carbs for the portion size. Always look at the serving size first. This will tell you what the serving size is proportional to the carbohydrates. In this example, the serving size is 4 pieces. The carbohydrates for that 4 pieces is 25 grams. Should you eat 6 pieces, the carbs will be 37.5 grams. Always keep the serving size in mind when doing your calculations. Practice estimating the carbohydrate content of your meals. Use reference lists to check your accuracy. A good starting place for children with diabetes is to have roughly 45 to 60 grams of carbs per meal and 0 to 15 grams for snacks. This will give you a good indication of what foods work for you and what their effect is. You will need to learn to estimate the amount of carbohydrates in food you typically eat. For example, the following amounts of carbohydrate-rich foods each contain about 15 grams of carbohydrates. 1 slice of bread, 1 6-inch tortilla, 1/3 of a cup of pasta, 1/3 of a cup of rice, half a cup of pinto beans, half a cup of starchy vegetables such as mashed potatoes, cooked corn, peas, or lima beans, 3/4 of a cup of dry cereal, or half a cup of cooked cereal, and 1 tablespoon of jelly. The basic food groups containing carbs are dairy, fruit, grains, legumes, starchy vegetables, and sugary sweets. Some foods are so low in carbohydrates that you may not have to count them unless you eat large amounts. For example, most non-starchy vegetables are low in carbohydrates. A half-cup serving of cooked non-starchy vegetables or a cup of raw vegetables has only about 5 grams of carbohydrate. As you become familiar with which foods contain carbohydrates and how many grams of carbohydrates are in the foods you eat, carbohydrate counting will be easier. Keeping record of your meals and the effect on your blood sugar will help you determine what food's effect is on you. These records will help your dietitian and doctor plot the best course. Have a look at the different foods and their average serving size and carbohydrates. Here is a list of resources that will give you more information on carbs in foods, carb counting, and tools. In the next chapter, we will look at the emotional side and handling type 1 diabetes.